tell you tonight that Jesus Christ, the Son of God, has an answer to every problem that you face. Jesus Christ, the Son of God, has an answer to every burden that you carry.
If he had not become a man, if he had not put on a body of flesh and blood, he could not have redeemed us. He had to become a man to die.
In America, we don't worship government, we worship God. We want all children to have the opportunity to know the blessings of God. We will not allow the government to censor sermons, to restrict the free speech of our pastors and our preachers and the people that we most respect.
And welcome, and thank you for joining me. I am your host, Billy Ray Parrish, for another edition of The Seed of the Nations, Talking Points for God's Gospel Radio Ministry, or from God's Gospel Radio Ministry. We will continue our study on the 2020 presidential election, as there has been a lot more to come out in the recent days since we last met. Thanksgiving Day may have been a break for what we thought may have been a break for the presidential election, but no. Sidney Powell and Lynn Wood and the other Trump members of his legal team were busy at work, including the president himself. There have been a lot of interesting developments over the last few days, particularly the last few hours, and we will go into some of those. First, I want to go into some stories that have broke over the last few hours, particularly in the state of Georgia. I also want to talk about the state of Pennsylvania. The Keystone State is key in the 2020 presidential election. Before we actually start talking about the different states, let's talk about something that I was hoping that would never have to talk about again. I was hoping that he would just be a dark cloud that was going away, but he is still a stain on America, and that's President or former President Barack Obama. Usually, presidents who have transitioned over go away. They stay out of the spotlight. You saw that with George W. Bush. He was not in the spotlight once President Barack Obama took office. And that's what presidents typically do, but not this man. This man is truly one that loves the limelight. Unfortunately for us, he is still in the limelight, and there he is right there. What is he saying now? Of course, he's trying to discredit President Trump. He's trying to take away from what is really going on here, as though there is some type of crime that President Trump is committing. It is not. Al Gore had his day in court in 2000. Why are they so afraid of Donald Trump having his day in court? They understand what's about to happen. They were involved. And they understand that when President Donald Trump is, again, President Donald Trump in 2021, that they, the deep state, will be in serious trouble. President Barack Obama there told a crowd of people during an interview that Hispanic Americans who voted for President Donald Trump are bigots. They did so because President Donald Trump agrees with them on abortion or gay marriage, evangelical Hispanics, but they ignore the fact that what he has said about Mexicans, illegal Mexicans particularly, or that he put them in cages, but he failed to mention that he was the one who started the cage issue. He was the one who built the cages, he was the one who started the program, but he failed to mention that. What he's saying is, if your skin color is not white and you vote for a white Republican, then you are therefore a bigot. And he says, if you are a white man or a white woman and you vote for Donald Trump or any other white Republican or black Republican or just Republican whatever, then you are a racist. You see how these people, these tolerant liberals act. They act as though they're so tolerant until you disagree with them. Then you see who the tolerant one really is. Barack Obama, at his finest, the race president. He was the first black man to win the office, and he has spent 12 years actually telling America how bad of a place we truly are. Although he does not leave, and when he does not stay gone for very long. But that's a typical Democrat, very similar to Al Gore, who is for climate change, wants us to eliminate or at least limit our carbon footprint while he's flying around in a 757 jet. No surprise, but it is what it is. Unfortunately, we still have to talk about him, but I have a feeling once Donald Trump gets back into office, once he is certified as the 45th president, again, re-elected president, that we will be talking about Barack Obama in a different light, this time wearing orange. I wish I had a picture of him in an orange jumpsuit. That would be really nice to see. Stay tuned. It is coming. Before we go any further, I do want to play this video for you because this is why we're doing the program, while we are doing our studies.
And so with that being said, we have been able to bring someone into the fold. And I'm talking about someone who's probably has one of the most brilliant minds, legal minds, in this country. Yes. If you think I'm lying, ask CNN. And some of those others who attacked everyday people and try to destroy their reputation and change their lives forever. Y'all join me in bringing in a fighter who's fighting for you, for Georgians, and this president. Y'all welcome Lynn Wu here.
Fight back. I love you too if you're not behind the camera and you're a member of the media. How you doing? I was sitting around Tuesday night watching the election returns. I've loved politics all my life, since I first voted in 1972. And I saw what I assumed was going to happen. I saw President Trump building up what I believed was going to be almost an historic landslide victory.
It was.
And then all of a sudden, every network, including Fox News, started doing what they do best. They started lying to the American public. And they took a victory from Donald Trump and they called it a lie. They took a defeat from Joe Biden and lied and said he won. And they sent you to bed, turning off the count of the vote so you could wake up the next morning like I did and go, what happened?
So what happened? Over the last few programs, we have been studying to find out what happened. The last few programs, we have found out what happened in several different states. The Democrats, along with some Republicans, sadly, most notably Georgia Governor Brian Kemp and the Secretary of State there in Georgia, are involved in the scheme to take down a sitting president. And the more that comes out, it seems like it's trickling out every hour. And every day, more and more massive dumps are dropped upon our tables. This is no longer conspiracy, folks. I understand that in the beginning, it was, or it seemed like, just talking points, as with our program. But these are no longer talking points. These are no longer conspiracy points to talk about, to continue on the dinner table with your liberal friends. Speaking of dinner table, I hope each and every one of you had a very nice, safe, and happy Thanksgiving Day. Thanksgiving is one of my favorite holidays. It makes me remember just what I am thankful for. There is so much for each and every one of us to be thankful for. And I hope that you never forget that. Even when times are bad, when there seems to be nothing but dark clouds around you, when it is dark outside, it is dark even when the sun is out. I hope you remember that there is still a lot to be thankful for. Christ's blood still saves. Christ is still there. We are still Americans. America, for the time being, is still America. And we still have Donald Trump as a president, a fighter indeed. We are no longer ran, for the time being, by that swamp full of swamp creatures, which is real. I am in Tennessee, so the swamp is not as deep here as it is in other states. And I am thankful for that. But wherever you may be, just remember you are still an American citizen. You still have it as good as anyone else on this earth. Let's continue to pray and hope for the best in this country and the best outcome in this presidential race. The more that comes out, the harder it gets to deny that there was foul play. Let's look at some of the results that have come out. I want to show you this here. This is an interesting little piece of information that I found talking about Joe Biden, who only won 16.7% of U.S. counties around the country, despite receiving the most votes in history. The former vice president only won 524 counties across the country. Maybe you're asking yourself, what is the total population or the total counties in the country? If you do a research, you find that in the United States, there are 3,007 counties. In the number of counties, number 135, all totaling 1,142 total counties. Now, I found this interesting. The state of Delaware has the least number of counties at three counties in the state of Delaware. That's interesting for me. The state of Texas has the most at 254. Just a little bit more information on counties. Counties have existed in the United States since its earliest days, with Virginia being the first state to establish counties. It's interesting. I thought it was fun to point that out. Pamela Geller, whom we have quoted on this show different times, quotes Patrick Basham. It's curious how Biden underperformed Hillary Clinton every city except 4. He explains that Donald Trump won the largest non-white vote share for a Republican presidential candidate in 60 years. Think about that. We're not going back to the 30s or 40s. We're going back to the 60s. Biden underperformed Hillary Clinton in every major metropolitan area around the country except for Milwaukee, Detroit, Atlanta, and Philadelphia. Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Detroit, Michigan, Atlanta, Georgia, and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It's amazing that we talk about those 4 cities because in those 4 cities, 2 of the states that we are talking about today reside there. David Marcus of the New York Post writes this, that between 2004 and 2016, black men and women gave between 88% and 95% of their votes to Democratic candidates for president. This year, 2020, Donald Trump won 18% of the vote among black men, a staggering number for a Republican, and it truly is when you think about it. Republican policies are typically better. The Democratic message, though, is what puts them over the top. They don't have message on substance. They don't have policy of substance. They have a message of emotions, and that's what separates a conservative and a liberal. Democrats run on emotion, at least liberal Democrats do. When I think about a Democrat, I typically don't like to think of liberals, because a liberal is different than a Democrat, but the modern day Democratic Party that runs for political office are all full of liberals. Even you look at a state like West Virginia with Joe Manchin as your senator, even he is liberal. He's moderate compared to a lot of the other Democrats, or probably even most of them, but he's still a liberal compared to a conservative or a moderate Republican. Don't get me wrong, I don't like a lot of these Republicans either. They call them Rhino, Republican in name only, and you have a lot of those. You're seeing Chris Christie as just one example of this, Jeff Flake, Jeb Bush, the Bushes in general, the Bush family, and there's just numerous other Republicans who disappoint you, disappoint me especially. The reason why I wanted to bring out some of these different stats is that Barack Obama is he's peddling right now. He's desperate. He is panicking because he knows his number is up if President Trump gets back in office. Many of you probably know of Candace Owens and Brandon Tatum. Brandon Tatum does the Officer Tatum. He's very big on YouTube. I've watched several of his videos, many of his videos in fact, and enjoy watching them because he is a black conservative. He used to be a police officer, so he knows firsthand the assault on police officers, the war that it is on police officers in our country right now. Not across the country, just certain cities, certain states, especially the ones controlled by Democrats. And if you don't believe me, just wait until something breaks out and you'll see where the chaos is at. Atlanta, Georgia is one of them. When you've seen the outbreak or after the shooting up in Kenosha, Wisconsin, you've seen the country kind of split again. The Milwaukee Brewers, the Milwaukee Bucks, they canceled games there, and I believe the Green Bay Packers may have as well. And it just shows you the real divide in our country. This was a situation that you probably remember where the victim was a black man. He was wanted on a warrant. The cops were called out. They responded, and in transit, the operator told the police officers that he was wanted for a warrant, so he was going to go back to jail. He knew this. He wasn't going to go back to jail. He went to his car and got his knife, and the officers warned him. He would not stand down, and he gets shot several times. And of course, this is the officer's fault, according to the media, or many of the media. Not all media members are the same. We're realizing more and more now, especially since the election, that most media outlets are the same, but not all of them are. Thank God for that. At least we do have some in the media that does not adhere to the corporate line or the status quo. Police officers are not our enemy. There are some bad apples, absolutely. But we've been seeing this divide for years now. And it started with Barack Obama. And probably the first time I noticed it, and it wasn't the first incident of it, but it's the first one that I really noticed, the great divide, was Michael Brown there in Ferguson, Missouri, when Darren Wilson, the police officer there, shot Brown, who was a big 18-year-old kid. I mean, this was not a kid, this was a grown man. And he was trying to get Officer Wilson's gun. The media really started with the hands up, don't shoot, which never happened. Victims said, or witnesses said, that this never happened. Michael Brown was shot because of his actions, not his inactions. It was a justifiable shooting. It was something that was terrible. It should have been prevented, but it wasn't Officer Wilson's fault. It was Michael Brown's fault, but our country has gotten away from accountability. Whenever someone does something wrong, we point it at the officer. President Reagan once said that whenever something happens, we have to stop blaming society. Or when someone breaks the law, we have to stop blaming society. It's not society's fault. There is a such thing as accountability. If you do something wrong, admit it. We all do stuff wrong. None of us are perfect. But we have gotten away from accountability in this country. Now let's get off of Darren Wilson and Barack Obama and the police for a moment, and let's get back to our 2020 presidential election, which still there is no official winner, and there will not be for a couple of weeks, maybe even another month. We'll see how all things plan out. Some people Probably a lot of people were making a big deal about President Trump saying if the Electoral College votes in Joe Biden, he will concede, he will leave the White House. He knows, as well as I do, and as well as most of you do, that the Electoral College is not going to put Joe Biden into the White House because they understand what is at stake here, but more so they understand what went on in many of these states, particularly those 4 major cities. Those major cities that Joe Biden overperformed or outperformed Hillary Clinton in, Milwaukee, Detroit, Atlanta, and Philadelphia, are the ones where major voter fraud took place. Not the only 4, but the major 4. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of our Constitution gives power to state legislatures to appoint electors, irrespective of judicial outcomes, and it is important despite the popular vote, especially if it is believed to be fraudulent. The popular vote does not decide our election, as most of you know, I'm sure. And despite popular vote, the electors do not have to vote with the winner of the popular vote. And we've seen this last time around with Hillary Clinton, when 2 of her electors voted for Donald Trump, which is how he received 306 electoral votes. And when we think about the state of Pennsylvania, Rudy Giuliani was just in the state of Pennsylvania on Wednesday, and it was interesting to me what city he chose: Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Many of you may know about the Civil War and the significance of Gettysburg to the Civil War. Gettysburg is known as the turning point in the war for the Northern Army. Up until this point, the South was considered to be winning by many. At the very least, it was a tie, it was a draw, as most of the bigger victories had been won by the Southern Army, the CSA, the Confederate States of America. It wasn't up until Gettysburg did the Northern Army have a momentum in the war, and this victory gave President Abraham Lincoln, the opportunity to give a big speech where the Northern Army was winning the war, the Gettysburg Address. Rudy Giuliani was here in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania on Wednesday, and I love the symbolism of it, the significance of it. Many people do not realize that a lot of times President Trump and his team will send out messages. Sometimes you have to decode them or just look behind them to understand the significance of them. I just love the way they were in Gettysburg, which this may have looked like the turning point or the turning tide in this 2020 presidential election, because Giuliani and the rest of the team, they have the evidence, they have the numbers. Even if you think something went on, like most people do, even a lot of Democrats realize there was something fishy or foul that went on. Even if you believe that, you have to have something to show something went on. That's why statistics are so important. That's why we need this evidence. On Wednesday, Rudy Giuliani pointed out some irregularities and anomalies that happened during the voting process. First, let's go back to the Constitution, where the state legislatures appoint electors. The state legislature is also the place that changes election laws. When a judge in Pennsylvania extended the date for the mail-in ballots to be received and counted, they were outside their bounds. This judge was outside their bounds because the state legislature has to do this, not a judge. When they did this, or when this judge did this, that made those ballots unconstitutional. It made them invalid. So there's millions of votes that are invalid. And probably the problem with this is as there's already been 2 orderings from the Supreme Court, Justice Alito, saying that Pennsylvania has to separate or segregate their votes from those ballots that was received after this date, or after the date in which this judge set. There's a reason for that, because those votes, as of right now, are invalid. There's a reason why they were going around the state legislature. They understood the state legislature was more than likely not going to allow for these mail-in ballots to count, so they went outside their legal. They went outside the legal process to get this done. But when they did that, they made these ballots invalid. During the press conference Wednesday, Rudy Giuliani pointed out some interesting facts. He pointed out some interesting statistics that, in layman's terms, we all can understand. Some of this stuff that these people point out, we probably just do not understand what it means in layman's terms. But when we look at the statistics, we realized, hey, they did something wrong. That can't happen. When we look at Pennsylvania, for example, with the mail-in ballots, the state of Pennsylvania sent out 1,823,148 mail-in ballots. A lot of ballots. 2 million people almost. Or 2 million ballots meant for 2 million people. Okay, approximately 1.4 million of those ballots were returned. A lot of people. Almost 400,000 didn't, but that's a good turnout. Here's where it gets a little bit interesting. Not just a little bit, but very interesting, because 2,589,243 of those ballots were counted. I shouldn't say of those ballots, should I? Because only 1,823,148 ballots were sent out. 1.4 million were received or returned. 589,243 were counted. 700,000 more ballots were returned than actually sent out, and 1.1 million more ballots were counted than actually returned. That's not right. That means 1.1 million of those votes are invalid. Okay, so let's look at some more statistics from the state of Pennsylvania. And these aren't my numbers. These are coming from Rudy Giuliani and the Trump team. These are on the books. You can dispute them, but they're there. 22,686 were returned on the same day in which the ballot was mailed to them. Another 32,591 were returned the day after they were sent out. Now, I don't know about the Postal Service in Pennsylvania, but I tell you, it doesn't work that way here. If you send something out on the same day, it's going in the state, they're lucky to get it the next day, let alone the day in which it was mailed. I am doubting very seriously that the 32,591 will receive the day after. That would mean that they would have to receive it the same day, and then put it in the mail that same day, and then for them to receive it the next day. So 22,686 that returned them on the same day that it was mailed, on the very day. Those, are illegal, they're invalid, they did not happen. Now, think about this. Another 20,000 returned their ballots before the date in which it was mailed. How does that happen? That means they were counting ballots that were never sent out. They postmarked on a certain date, but they never sent them out. That's another 20,000. That right there is 42,000 ballots that have to be thrown out on top of the 1.1 million vote tally that went into this mail-in scheme. Okay, so that's not it. 8,021 of the ballots that were returned were from dead people. So there's another 8,000 votes have to be thrown out. 1.9 million. 4,984 never even requested a ballot. Now, I know that the laws change from state to state. Like in California, even if you don't request a ballot, you will get one, which opens it up even further for more fraud. Okay, so we think about California and how it stays blue, how it has stayed blue for so long, despite the ineffective leadership. That's because the state is opened up greatly to election fraud. And there's no one out there to do anything about it because they just simply do not care. The politicians don't care. I shouldn't say, I'm not talking about the people, because there's a lot of conservative people out in California. There's conservative districts out in California. But with that said, there's not enough Republican leaders to change the outcome. If there were, then as we shown last program, here's the map as CNN has it. California is blue, most of the West Coast is blue, parts of here blue, most of the Northeast is blue. But if we look at the results as shown by the server seized in Germany from Seidel, we see that the majority of the country is red. California right here, it's just Trump didn't win by an overwhelming amount, but he won enough to take the states. Same here. Even Virginia, he won in Virginia. Just barely squeaked them out. But here, California is dark red, just like here in Tennessee. Now, I doubt very seriously that California is as red as Tennessee, but apparently this is within at least a 5-point margin, if not more. And I can't tell you the exact number of the outcome, because I don't have access to the server. But the server showed that Trump not only won California, but he won it easily. Which, knowing what I know now, that doesn't surprise me, because, well, most of America is conservative, or at least conservative in its values. Okay, so I want to point out a couple of more anomalies with Pennsylvania. Rudy Giuliani has stated on different times that there are 600,000 illegal votes in the state of Pennsylvania in just Allegheny County, which is Pittsburgh, as well as Philadelphia County, which is Philadelphia. Just 600,000 in those two counties alone. And Philadelphia is one of the cities in which the Democrats hit very hard. I heard someone explain, it was from someone from Overstock, who explained that the way the Democrats did this election is that they didn't use widespread voter fraud, which when I hear about this, I think of widespread, but the way he explained it was they selected 6 or 7 different locations to target, and in doing so, they didn't get someone's or enough people's suspicions up that way. When I think about 6 or 7 cities or locations, I think about widespread voting fraud. Because you look at just in Philadelphia, in Pittsburgh, and Philadelphia, you're talking about 600,000 illegal votes, as Rudy Giuliani has pointed out. And we just listed almost 2 million illegal votes that have to be thrown out, because mathematically or statistically, these things just can't happen. We're not talking about returned on the next day. I don't believe that those are legitimate ballots, because the mailing system just doesn't work that way. But if you keep those 32,000 in play, you're still talking about the 1.1 million more ballots that were received than actually sent out. That right there cannot happen. Another 22,600 returned on the same day in which it was mailed. That cannot happen. Another 20,000 that was returned before it was actually mailed. That can't happen. Another 8,000 from dead people, and another 5,000 from people who never requested a ballot. And it's really starting to look like, not look like, but it's starting to show just how widespread the fraud actually was in the 2020 election in just Pennsylvania alone. I've always heard in baseball that the first hit or the first home run, the hardest one to get's the first one. So probably in this process, you're thinking that the hardest state to get is the first one. The hardest state to flip would be the first one. If one does flip, you'd think that with the amount of fraud that we are seeing that is being presented, you would think that more and more states would come around. Donald Trump, the good thing is for his legal team, they don't have to prove the entire country was fraudulent. They just have to make a case that fraud did exist. And with the numbers in Pennsylvania that we just pointed out, you see that not only is there a possibility for fraud, there is no doubt that fraud did take place. Just go back to the idea that Joe Biden received 80 million votes, but he only won a small portion of the counties. Let's go back to that image to refresh the memory here. He only received 16.7% of the counties. He won 16.7% of the counties, or 524 of the total 1,000 or 3,142 counties. That means that Donald Trump won 2,600 counties. That right there is an astronomical figure when you think about the amount of voter fraud that was taking place in the 2020 presidential election. It's beginning to look more and more like fraud. Kind of taken from that song, it's beginning to look like Christmas. Well, it's beginning to look like fraud. Sidney Powell has said the best thing that Joe Biden can do is to concede before he implicates himself into voter fraud, which is why she has warned these states about certifying the results, because they would be implicated themselves in voter fraud. Which, when we think about what happened Wednesday, a judge blocked the certification of the votes there in Pennsylvania, the electoral votes, because they understand what's going on at play. They understand just how significant of fraud was, how significant fraud was in the state of Pennsylvania. It's not just a handful here and there. While a handful here and there can lead up to a lot, it's a lot here and a lot there. You talk about 600,000 in just 2 cities, you're talking about a lot of fraud, especially when certain resources or certain sources are saying that Joe Biden won the state by 50. Some are saying by 80,000. Others are saying by 100,000. But between 50 and 100,000, 600,000 illegal votes, Trump wins it easily. Let's just say he wins the state by 400,000 votes. That's how big the fraud is in this state. That's why we cannot stop fighting the good fight. The Bible talks about running your race. We have to run our race. We have to continue the fight here. We have to fight the good fight of faith. We have to continue with our fight. If we don't, then they're going to get away with it. And that's what they had hoped was going to happen. As we talked about last time around, in 2012, Mitt Romney and Barack Obama, when they squared off, I guess you'd say, Barack Obama in the state of Florida was using some of the same systems that's being used today, which is why he won the state of Florida. Now he won the election very easily. But if you think that Florida was the only state that he used it in, probably a little bit misleading there. More so in Pennsylvania, we think about the Dominion voting system. This was not passed through the state legislature, but it was mandated by the governor, which cannot happen. Again, it has to go through the state legislature, which they bypassed. Why? They wanted to steal the election. They knew from 2016 they could not defeat Donald Trump at the ballot box, which is why COVID-19 was cooked up. Barack Obama sends $3.4 million to this lab in Wuhan, China, a lab of virology. And a few years later, we have this so-called pandemic that's killed less than 20,000 people by itself. It just doesn't make any sense until you start to look at the bigger picture. 2020 presidential elections. Why would Dr. Anthony Fauci, who has been dubbed America's doctor a few years back, say that Donald Trump was going to face some type of pandemic? How would he know that? We can't even predict the weather. The weather is not accurate, but somehow we can predict a virus or some type of pandemic years in advance. It doesn't make no sense to me. I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I'll tell you something, that doesn't sound right to me. All right, so we just about covered all of Pennsylvania, because Pennsylvania is getting very interesting, because they won't certify their electoral votes because they realize something foul took place. So we talk about Georgia now. Georgia is one of my favorite stories right now, because we are seeing different storylines and narratives, it seems like every day. On election night, Donald Trump was winning Georgia fairly easily. And then we noticed that they stopped counting different times, and we asked ourselves, why? What's going on? I was watching Fox News at the time, and I remember Fox saying that the city of Atlanta or Fulton County had stopped counting, but they were unsure why. Then it comes out that there was a water line that had busted, or a water pipe that had busted. They got to researching that, and that's not true. That never happened. That was a lie. Why would they lie? What were they up to? What did they do? We know that in the wee morning hours, early morning hours on Wednesday, that Joe Biden suddenly got a massive dump in different cities and states across the country, including all these battleground states, particularly there in Georgia. We know now that the state of Georgia was bought. If you can buy a red state, imagine what else they can do. We know that Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia, is bought and paid for. Lynn Wood has made that known. But I want to give a lot of information, or at least some information here, that obtains to Georgia. Sidney Powell, late Wednesday night, filed a lawsuit, a massive lawsuit in the state of Georgia. And it really is explosive. It shows different things. Let's look at it here further. We calculated there exists clear evidence of 20,311 absentee or early votes in Georgia that voted while registered as having moved out of state. Okay, so 20,000 votes that should not have counted. Specifically, these persons were showing on the National Change of Address database as having moved or as having filed subsequent voter registration in another state, also as evidence that they moved and even potentially voted in another state. The 20,311 votes by persons documented as having moved exceeds the margin by which Donald Trump lost the election by 7,601 votes. We're seeing this in Pennsylvania as well as Georgia. Almost 2 million votes in Pennsylvania had to be thrown out. Donald Trump wins that state easily. Donald Trump wins Georgia easily when you just take into consideration taking away those 20,000 votes. He wins the state by about 13,000 votes. That's not all. Look at this here. A former electronic intelligence analyst under 305th Military Intelligence with experience gathering SAM missile system electronic intelligence. The Dominion software was accessed by agents acting on behalf of China and Iran in order to monitor and manipulate elections, including the most recent U.S. general election in 2020. The declaration further includes a copy of the patent records for Dominion systems, in which Eric Coomer is listed as the first of the inventors of Dominion voting system. Maybe, perhaps you remember Eric Coomer from the last program. He is the executive of Dominion voting systems, and he put up on social media that he was ensuring that Donald Trump would not win re-election. What he meant was the fix was in. There's a reason why Joe Biden nor Kamala Harris went out to campaign very often. They knew this was in the works. They knew what they were going to do. Do you see why they were so confident that they were going to win? They had this system in place. Donald Trump was working sometimes, I believe the last weekend, he hit 11 cities in 3 days. That man literally worked like the Energizer Bunny. In fact, I've had conversations with Boone talking about how Donald Trump should replace the Energizer Bunny because his battery goes out less or fewer or less often than the actual Energizer Bunnies does. Just throwing that out there for consideration, Energizer. Now here's something else that I found interesting. Look at this. In addition to the alternative request for relief in the preceding paragraphs, hereby restated, plaintiffs seek a permanent injunction requiring the county election board to invalidate ballots cast by voters whose signatures on their registrations have not matched with ballot, envelope, and voter registration check, all dead votes, and all 900 military ballots in Fulton County that supposedly were 100% for Joe Biden. Every single military ballot there in Fulton County, 900 of them, were for Joe Biden. Don't buy that for a moment. This is widespread, massive voter fraud. These 3 pieces of evidence that I just showed you was part of Sidney Powell's lawsuit, in which she filed on Wednesday night. 104 pages of. It's very deep, it's very in-depth, and I, for one, have enjoyed studying. I have enjoyed learning about this stuff. It's bigger than politics this time, folks. This is about justice. Donald Trump said in 2016 that that election was going to determine what type of country we have. A free one, a one that is based on freedom, or one that is no different than anyone else. I tell you what I like. I like the one based on freedom, the one built on freedom, the one where we can choose to do what we want or do not do what we don't want to do, whichever. Here's some more evidence about the law, or here's some more details about the lawsuit filed in Georgia. Again, Pennsylvania and Georgia are the 2 big focus, or the 2 states that we're focused on today. And the overview of vote fraud allegations includes illegal procedures, insecure voting machines, and illegal ballots. Okay, so illegal procedures, broken chain of custody for voting machines and bundles of ballots. Explains we typically receive the machines, the ballot marking devices on the Friday before the election with a chain of custody letter to be signed on Sunday, indicating that we had received the machines and the count on the machines when received, and that the machines have been selected. In this particular case, we were asked to sign the chain of custody letter on Sunday, even though the machines were not delivered until 2 a.m. in the morning on Election Day. This is unacceptable, and voting machines should not be out of custody prior to an election day. And according to further reports, not only were they asked to sign illegal statements about something that had yet to happen, receiving them on Sunday, and they didn't receive them until early morning hours of Tuesday morning, there was an update to the system on the day or the day before the day of the election. There's a lot of uncertainty surrounding this election because of activities of the such. Let's look at some more illegal procedures. We're looking at Democrat majority counties illegally prevented Republican poll watchers from monitoring vote counting activities. And this is not something just in Georgia. We've seen this in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania as well. This report explains that Democrat majority counties provided political parties and candidates, including the Trump campaign, no meaningful access or actual opportunity to review and access the validity of mail-in ballots during the pre-canvassing meetings. While in the audit or recount, they witnessed Trump votes being put into Biden files. This is no longer funny, folks. This is sad what we're actually seeing, what we're witnessing. In fact, the witnesses testify that there was no meaningful way to review or audit any activity, and there was no way to tell if any county was accurate or if the activity was proper. This is not a fair and free election. This was not. This was done behind the dark, in the dark, and behind the scenes. And when things like this happen, people will not accept the results as fair. They will not accept them as accurate, which is why we must fix the system that we have. And this is one of the reasons why Donald Trump is challenging this election, not just because the media says he lost, but because this is the only system we have, and his greatest legacy could be, at least part of his greatest legacy could be, in part, to fix the system, not just right now, but for the future of this country. That's a patriot. That is a real patriot, my friends. Further, let's look at some more illegal procedures. We're seeing large batches of pristine, identical ballots. 98% for Biden. Think about that one. More and more irregularities. A large number of ballots were identical and likely fraudulent. What does this remind you of? This reminds you of just printing them out the same day, like they did in Pennsylvania, sent them out the same day, and returned the same day. They were all alike, they were identical. And not only were they likely fraudulent, but they were fraudulent. By my estimate, in observing these ballots, approximately 98% constituted votes for Joe Biden. I only observed 2 of these ballots as votes for President Donald Trump. That just does not happen. Now back to Philadelphia or Pennsylvania for a moment. Rudy Giuliani on Wednesday was talking about a batch of votes that had come in, 570,000 votes, and only 3,200 were for Donald Trump. These irregularities are beginning to pile up, and it's no longer where you can deny that something bad took place. 96,800 mail-in ballots were illegally counted as they were not cast by legal votes or voters. So when we talk about the 20,000 votes that should have been thrown out because of not living in the state, you're seeing another 96,000. I can't pronounce his name, or I don't want to butcher his name even more, but he concluded that hundreds of thousands of votes for President Trump in the 2020 general election were transferred to former Vice President Biden. That's not my words, folks. These are words of experts that have been looking at this very deeply. The voting system for Dominion was created to do this. It wasn't a glitch. It was a feature. A glitch is something that happens. It's not meant to happen. A feature is something that happens that is designed to happen. And this is what Dominion was designed for. Here, with more insecure voting machines, the Dominion system itself. It undermines the reconciliation of the number of votes and the number of ballots cast, opening the door to ballot stuffing and fraud. And this is exactly what we saw. We didn't just see it years ago. We're still seeing it. It's just we have someone now who is willing to fight the injustice. In Floyd County, 3,300 votes found on a memory stick that had never been counted. It is unclear how many other times that this occurred. How many other memory sticks were out there? We're hearing about numerous USB disks and floppy disks, and well, probably not floppy disk anymore. That's some years back. But we're seeing so many of these things come to light. So many of these anomalies come to light. They're not anomalies. These are things that actually happen, but they shouldn't have happened. They're not irregularities. It's just complete fraud on a massive level. Again, with illegal ballots. Democrat majority counties performed virtually no signature verification, allowing massive illegal vote dumps for Joe Biden. And we've seen this in other cities, particularly the ones controlled by Democrats. No other metropolitan county in Georgia rejected even a single absentee ballot application for signature mismatch. Think about that. That never happens. So we're pushing the hour mark. But let's continue on with some of these irregularities, as they're calling them. Again, with the illegal ballots, as hundreds of witnesses observed illegal handling of ballots, even with restricted access. Okay, so we're going on, and I'm getting told that OBS is acting up. I'm not sure what happened. I hope it didn't disconnect. Just getting this warning that it did disconnect, so I hope that did not happen. But okay, so the summary of vote fraud allegations is like this: illegal procedures, which this is not football, but this is the voting process. We're looking at insecure voting machines and illegal ballots. We're not talking about a conspiracy anymore, folks. We're talking about something that went wide and deep. They thought about this for a while. They knew that from 2016 they could not beat Donald Trump at the ballot box, so what did they do? They cooked up this scheme. Now, this is something that I found very interesting. I found this interesting because, look on here, this is from the lawsuit that Sidney Powell filed. And it talks about watermarks. There were watermarks on the ballots, and she observed several different of these ballots that where the watermarks were gray instead of transparent, which led her to believe that the ballots were counterfeit. It makes me wonder if she observed 3, 4, 5, however many she observed, how many others had fraudulent or counterfeit watermarks. I thank God that these things were in place. Now, I want you to look at a tweet from President Trump. He explains that Biden can only enter the White House as president if he can prove that his ridiculous 80 million votes were not fraudulently or illegally obtained. When you see what happened in Detroit, Atlanta, Philadelphia, and Milwaukee, massive voter fraud, he's got a big unsolvable problem. This tells me Donald Trump knows. Donald Trump absolutely knows what happened. He's seen all the evidence. His people have all the evidence. And he's not going to stop for anyone. He says that if the Electoral College goes against him, he will step aside, but he knows that's not going to happen because he knows what happened. They now know what happened. More and more is coming out, and more will come out from now to the next time we talk. More and more is going to come out. This is something that I enjoy because, again, justice will be served. President Donald Trump is fighting for we the people. Lynn Wood, Sidney Powell, Richard Grenell, Rudy Giuliani, Jenna Ellis, and on. They're all working for President Trump and for we the people because they believe in this nation. They believe in this president. They love this nation. They love this president. And they love we the people. Even if you didn't vote for President Trump, they're fighting just as hard for you because we no longer want to embrace socialism as some politicians have completely flirted with and embraced. Just a moment on those Hispanics who voted for Donald Trump, the evangelical Hispanics and so forth. They're not bigots. A lot of them come from countries where socialism was in place. They understand what it means to be a socialist. They can't vote for a party that embraces socialist ideas. This fight is not over. It's far from over. In fact, just as it did way back in 1863, the Battle of Gettysburg, the tide turned to the Northern Army. There at the Battle of Gettysburg, I guess you could say that on Wednesday, the tide turned for Donald Trump with all this evidence that they put forward in the massive lawsuit they filed in Georgia. Project Amistad, which is a nonprofit organization or agency which works with the disability or the disabled and the elderly, has filed suit to have the Michigan results invalid because of all the, not just allegations, but all the evidence of fraud coming forth. They understand what's going on, and more of this is going to come out. Arizona, Nevada, just wait. It's going to come forward. And before we go, I want to say I thank each and every one of you for joining us. I hope you learned something from this program. This was a deep program. It was more focused on Georgia and Pennsylvania because that's where a lot of the hard hitting has been going on the last few days. But more to come. Stay tuned. Stay ready. Be ready. Be prepared. When Donald Trump wins this election, there is going to be chaos. And I don't want to scare anybody, but there is going to be chaos. Just be ready because a lot of these cities, the mayors and the governors and so forth, are going to tell the police officers to stand down. The same ones they were screaming defund the police are now going to use the police to stand down and just let anyone do as they please. It's going to get hectic. It's not going to get any better anytime soon. They're going to be like spoiled children. When Donald Trump wins the election, they're going to act like spoiled children. When they don't get what they want, they're going to protest. Not just protest, but they're going to riot and loot. And you may see some buildings burn, some cities burn. I hope that doesn't happen. But if 2020 has taught us anything, it's to be ready, prepare, or to expect the unexpected. Before we go, again, this has been Talking Points for the Seed of a Nation from God's Gospel Radio Ministry. I am Billy Ray Parrish, your host, thanking you again. Until next time, I thank you. Stay safe. God bless, and God bless America. And as always, here is our ending. God bless.
Woken up on November the 4th and found that we knew who our president would be. And nobody wants to have to sit through day after day and endure the chads. Thank gosh we don't have chads this time. Nobody wants to sit around day after day after day after an exhausting campaign to try to figure out who's going to be president, especially at a time when the presidency has never been more important in terms of world affairs. But let me tell you what we got to do. We got to wait. We've got to have patience. Because if we don't do this right and take the time to do it right, God help us if we get it wrong. So thank you for letting me be a part of this today. I thank the President of the United States for asking me to help him. I want you to all fight back. Fight back for America.